Hello and welcome again to the Barbarian Philosopher podcast. This is episode number 3. As always, I'm your host, Jerome Acevedo. I'm here again with my friend Liron. How's everything been with you, brother?
It's good. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I'm good, man.
Awesome. Anything new?
Anything new? No, nothing special. I mean, there's a couple of new things, but there's things I'm going to keep to myself.
Right? Oh. Okay. Understood. So we have this weekend, UFC 205 is coming up.
Yeah, I'm excited, man.
I'm very excited for that.
Excited too.
I wanted to just kind of do some predictions for Alvarez versus Mcgregor, Woodley versus Wonder Boy, and her and Carolina Karakawa. She has just like what's her name is Jurjeka.
Yeah.
She has that, but with a K.
Yeah.
So it's JJ and KK.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Tate is on there as well. But I'm not familiar at all. I haven't seen any of her opponents' fights, so I would literally just be picking Tate by default.
Yeah.
So let's start from the bottom up. So JJ versus Carolina. Do you have any predictions on that?
I mean, when you look at JJ, she is so hungry and so determined and. She's like a little cyborg, you know. She reminds me of like a small cyborg, same like intensity levels, same aggression levels. And then when you look at KK, she's kind of like, I mean, she fights with the same intensity, but there's something different about her. There's something different about her approach to fighting, and she seems a bit more, if you ask me, a bit more of a complete, well-rounded fighter.
Okay.
Than JJ. So I feel like it's like a kind of a rock paper scissors thing. So
okay,
we're gonna see how these styles
match up.
Exactly.
Okay, I think so. I got a chance to look up maybe like 1 or 2 fights from KK, and one of the things I noticed is she seems not a lot, but she seems noticeably slower.
Yeah.
Than Joanna.
For sure, yeah.
She seems a lot stronger, but also a lot slower. And I didn't know this until recently. Apparently they had fought before, and Joanna won by rear naked choke. Now, that being said, you know, there's plenty of people who fought and then meet years down the line, and it's a completely different, scenario.
Yeah,
so that
like Rampage and
Iceman, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Why am I flaking out on his name right now?
Liddell.
Chuck Liddell.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think he beat Liddell twice, but he lost. It was the Brazilian guy. What's his name? The really crazy one who got all that plastic surgery after.
Vanderlei.
Yes, yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. He got his ass whipped by Vanderlei, and then he knocked the shit out of him.
He did.
So
you know. So one of the things that really strikes me as what'll be interesting is to watch how Carolina deals, or rather how JJ deals with the clinch. That was kind of the strongest area I saw from Carolina, was her clinch game and the power that she had in that. So if she can, now to say that though, Joanna is also nice in the clinch as well, but I just feel like the speed and her more technical boxing will probably be what she kind of relies on. If Carolina can kind of catch her against the fence or catch her in the middle and clinch her up, I think it'll be a very interesting fight. Yeah. I'm not overly familiar.
How's her wrestling, KK?
How's
either of their wrestling?
Let me see. I know when Joanna fought the little, I think she's Mexican, I could be wrong, but the little short wrestler chick, when she became the champion, I can't think of her name right now. She was a wrestler, and Joanna stuffed all her shit. Like, that was pretty much the little wrestler chick's only plan, more or less. Like, she couldn't deal with the hands at all.
But it's one thing to just be a good wrestler, and it's one thing in MMA to set up your wrestling by having good striking. So KK's striking is decent. It's probably not as good as Joanna's, but Carolina's, if she can if she can set up her close game, her close quarter game up with a medium range game, you know, with some decent boxing, and then get in the clinch, maybe beat her up in a clinch and then take her down.
Yeah.
I would feel like that's how it would go for Carolina if she was to win.
I watched Carolina and Rose Namajunas, however you pronounce her name, and I believe Rose got, if I remember correctly, Rose got the majority of the takedowns there. She didn't completely dominate Carolina on the ground though, so she was able to hold her own. And again, I think also just the strength issue. Carolina seems noticeably stronger.
Yeah.
At least when she hits and clinches, she seems to be a little bit more solid.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of
I think it's
versus strength.
That would be my guess. That's what I expect to see on that one. I'm gonna have to go ahead and just go with JJ.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. Just based on the fights I've seen, JJ seems to be at a slightly different class.
Yeah.
Usually, I like to go with a more humble fighter. Okay. I feel like the humility often gains someone an advantage. I'm big on the mental game of fighting, as you know. I find that genuine humility from a fighter, and Carolina does come from that kind of background of just being appreciative to be there in the first place. Often that's when you see an upset.
Okay.
That's when you see the upset, is when the champion thinks that they're God, and which I'm not saying JJ's like that, but she really, you know, is on a high, and maybe gets a little bit overconfident, and then you get surprised. You know, that happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't think that this particular fight, I'm not going to call it like that. If you wanted to pin me in the corner and say who's going to win, I would say JJ too.
I agree with you on that one. Yeah. Wonder Boy versus Woodley. Who do you have on that?
Well, interestingly, on this one, Woodley is the underdog, right? Woodley is the underdog, which is pretty crazy. I mean, you can see Tyron Woodley with that overhand right, just like he did against Robbie, and just like he did against the wrestler dude. Bleach blonde hair. What's his name?
Koscheck.
Yeah. Just like those fights, you can see that big right overhand just clobbering Wonder Boy and just knocking it. Obviously, you know, knocking his tooth out or something. You know, you can see that happen. But Thompson is a new breed of fighter. You know, he is a traditional martial artist who has adapted himself to MMA, and he's quick and his angles are incredible, and you don't know what he's gonna come out with offensively, and he can pick guys apart and nullify the kind of, I don't want to say the brawling style of Woodley, because it's not. I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a brawler.
No,
but it's for me, it's a very good two-dimensional style of it.
Yeah, it's very straightforward.
It's straightforward. He's gonna knock you out, and he's gonna impose his will on you, and he's gonna intimidate you, and he's gonna be the bigger, stronger guy. That to me is what martial arts is all about, is kind of rising above that.
Right.
So whilst I can see if Thompson has an off night, him getting knocked out again, I think it's stylistically, I see Wonder Boy just kind of taking him out, picking him apart.
I agree with you with that, and there's a few fights that I look at that kind of highlight that to me. So one of the tendencies that Woodley has is he likes to back himself up, or allow himself to be backed up against the cage, and kind of bait the guy into overcommitting, and then he'll shoot for the takedown, or he'll clinch and reverse it and put the other guy on the cage, and then start throwing power shots and utilizing his athleticism and his wrestling, right? But when he fought Rory McDonald, Rory didn't take the bait. So again, you have with Rory, although the fighting style is pretty different from Wonder Boy, you have a longer fighter who kind of stayed at a distance, sniped from the outside from a safe range, and used a wide variety of attacks, right? And in that fight, we saw Woodley kind of freeze up, right?
He didn't know what to do.
He wasn't able to deal with it. his plan wasn't the plan. His setup
because
really
he's not a tall fighter for that weight. He's so heavy that for that weight class, he's not going to get away with the extra few inches on guys.
Right.
And I mean, should we check the stats? He's going to have a sizable reach disadvantage, I'm sure.
I would imagine so. And so what you saw is him kind of backed up against the cage, waiting for that kind of overcommitment. The overcommitment not coming, and then getting kind of caught and lost and trying to figure out what Rory was doing, which is very similar to what Wonderboy did when he fought Johnny Hendricks. Outside, wide variety, caught him up against the fence, didn't get close enough for any kind of a clinch to enact, and kind of picked apart. So I can easily see Wonderboy utilizing that same strategy. Also because he has that very lead leg heavy kicking style, you know, especially that lead side kick. I can see him utilizing that to keep Woodley at a safe distance.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think he's gonna like flash knock him out.
No.
But I mean, you look at his significant strikes, he lands per minute 4.69. It's a lot of significant strikes per minute, you know.
Yeah.
Versus Woodley at 2.57. So I mean, he's gonna out punch him.
Yeah.
He's gonna outstrike him, and it's gonna wear him out and wear him out and wear him out. I don't know how good. So he did this. Woodley is kind of a similar fighter to Hendricks. Hendricks did fall apart. Thompson did pick him apart. I don't know if Woodley's going to do the same thing. He's kind of on a high now.
Yeah.
Hendricks was coming off a loss, so it's just a little harder to pull yourself out of
the momentum is in Woodley's favor, whereas it's not in Hendricks' favor.
Right. But I mean, Woodley's fight against Lawler, I don't know how much that proved. Lawler didn't quite look sharp. He didn't quite look confident. He didn't quite look like he was ready to get in a war.
I think Lawler, to some extent, may have been overly cautious of Woodley's power, and this is a point in Tyrone's favor that I see as well. So a lot of people are making a big deal of Tyrone's ability to cover distance explosively, right? But Wonderboy comes from a karate style background where that point sparring is very much so explosive, very quickly get in, blitz, and try to land something. But what Wonderboy does, which Rory McDonald does not do and worked in Rory's favor, is Wonderboy has that hands low kind of, Taekwondo style. And both Woodley and Wonderboy like to kind of stand there and try to bait the guy into a sense of false relaxation. So I can see Woodley, if Wonderboy gets too caught trying to bait Woodley, because Woodley does the same thing. He kind of stands there, just kind of feels out a little bit, doesn't do too much, feels out a little bit, and then boom!
Yeah, that's
big blitz, and then a giant overhand, right? Yeah. I can see Wonderboy standing there trying to maybe bait him a little bit, and a blitz coming in, and if Woodley can connect, because Wonderboy's hands are always kept so low, that could very much be in Woodley's favor. And also the sideways stance. That super sideways traditional stance, of course, leaves you very susceptible to leg kicks. And Tyrone throws leg kicks like he punches. He has some big power. I think it was Jake Shields. I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But he fought somebody where he was just dropping the motherfucker every time he connected with a leg kick.
Yeah.
So that's going to be
He ended up with Carlos Condit. He threw some leg kicks and took his ACL. I mean, I don't think it was direct. It was kind of one of those freak things as well, but they had something to do with that.
Yeah, they definitely. I think it was between the damage from the leg kicks, and then he took Condit down, and Condit's leg got caught in a weird way, and then the leg kick came again. Yeah. And I think just accumulatively, you're right, it all added up. But Woodley throws some mean-ass kicks. So I think as long as Wonderboy can keep his range, can keep Woodley guessing, and not fall into the up against the fence trap, it leans into Wonderboy's favor. And he's just been looking fucking amazing in his last couple.
He's so crisp.
Oh,
everything's so accurate. So he's like a He's like a video game character. I mean, his technique is perfect, and he's fun to watch. And honestly, I guess not personally, but just stylistically, I prefer Thompson as the champ, just because I want to see him fight. Yeah, I like to see his fights. Woodley's fun too, because he's got that brute power. But I mean, it's just nice to see it, performance like that. So I feel like everyone's kind of behind Thompson.
I agree. I think there's something exciting about just watching somebody who just has unbelievable power demolish something.
Yeah. Like
but
a lion,
technically, I think that's more from a casual standpoint. That's very exciting, right? But from a technical standpoint, when kind of, okay, he's going to blitz and come with that overhand, or he's going to take you down, and it's just kind of repeating the same.
Yeah, especially when we have seen that style many times before. Yeah. Albeit this is kind of the level of power of Woodley, just out and out power, athleticism. He's like a football player.
Yeah,
with MMA gloves on, like that level of power is something new, I think, in the UFC, at least in that weight class.
For that weight class, for sure.
Yeah,
Johnny Hendricks was close to it, but he
wasn't
didn't
athletic like that.
Yeah,
he had the knockout power, but he wasn't all round athletic like Woodley. Woodley's like a different beast.
Very much so.
He's like a mix between GSP and Hendricks, and then just on another level of both of them, for me personally. So I really like both of them. I'm happy if either of them win. But I'm gonna give the nod personally. I would give the nod to Stephen Thompson at this point.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
McGregor versus Alvarez.
McGregor versus Alvarez. This is gonna be an interesting one. So McGregor's only lost 3 times. Alvarez only 4 times. He's actually kind of got a better record, 28-4, and Connor's 20-3. And Eddie's fought some really tough cats.
Yeah,
all over the place. He's gone all over the place. A long career coming into this, and then he's looked. His last fight was against Dos Anjos, right? And he destroyed him. He utterly destroyed him in every way. Long range. I don't know if he took him down, but close range, just all over the place. He was just one step ahead. And then we saw Dos Anjos, he didn't look that good against Tony Ferguson in his last fight. So
Right.
But sometimes when you get beaten up that bad, it kind of has an effect on you. So Alvarez, point being, Alvarez is on a roll right now. Mm-hmm. I think he's probably the best he's looked in his career for me. So Conor is fighting the best Eddie Alvarez that he can fight. So this is going to be a really, really tough fight for Conor.
Yeah.
A really tough fight for Conor, and Conor's acting like it's going to be easy. He might be right. Maybe it will be easy, but this is a serious opponent for him.
Yeah. I think this is a close fight, but if I have to pick, I edge it to Conor. And I can definitely see a very clear way that Alvarez could win this, but I'll tell you why. So with Alvarez, when Conor fought Diaz, the biggest issue that Conor had was dealing with Diaz's pressure up against the fence, right? And Alvarez is a much better wrestler or grappler from a takedown pressure perspective.
Exactly.
And if Diaz was able to pressure him against the fence, then Alvarez will definitely be able to pressure him against the fence. And much more takedown oriented, obviously a wrestler as opposed to jiu-jitsu. I think that works in Alvarez's favor. And that has kind of been, for lack of a better term, exposed in the Diaz fight, is McGregor's inability to kind of deal with that pressure off the fence in that way.
Yeah. You can go and beat him up.
Yeah.
Once you get inside his range and you stop him from his angles and his pure boxing, his old school pure boxing that he's adapted for MMA better than anyone else in the game by a long stretch. But once you nullify that, you can just go and beat him up.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say he quits, because I think he's I think really against Diaz as a smaller guy, he didn't quit in the second fight. In the first fight he did. He choked, and everyone saw that. But in the second fight, he dug deep, and we saw something, that second wind, that a lot of people thought was, he was done. So he's as tough as they get. I don't know if he's just Alvarez is gonna just be able to beat him up for 5 rounds like that. Mm-hmm. But we've seen we've seen what his weakness is.
Right.
Right. You just have to kind of close the distance with him.
Yeah.
And Alvarez likes that. He's kind of a dirty boxer. He's got good wrestling. Mm-hmm. Now the difference for me is when the game gets up against the cage, or when it gets tight. Mm-hmm. When Conor dropped Nate, he was afraid to engage. Yeah. He did not want Nate on his back. He will not have the same problem with Alvarez. He's not going to be afraid of Alvarez on his back. In a way, Nate is more dangerous horizontal on his back than he is standing up. In a way,
I can see that.
And Conor was very smart not to engage, because he would have ended up in a triangle or some new BJJ black belt shit that you and I don't even know about. So.
Right.
So he was smart in that fight. This is going to be a little bit different, because it's like, this is the beauty of MMA. Because there are so many facets to the game, you don't even realize it when you're watching two fighters sometimes, but there's something hidden going on. For example, I'll put it like this. Back to Conor and Nate. Nate's, like I just said, Nate's amazing jiu-jitsu, and his cut above, the huge level of jiu-jitsu, his game was above Conor's. And even Conor would admit that, or Coach Kavanagh would admit that. Dictated the striking. Mm-hmm. He dictated him. When Conor dropped people like Dustin Poirier or whatever, he got straight in and he just finished it. Imagine Dustin Poirier was a, black belt times 10 Gracie jiu-jitsu guy, right? He might have thought twice about jumping on top of Poirier. Whether Poirier was on his front or on his back, he might have thought twice about it.
Right.
So Nate's ground game affected his boxing. They work hand in hand. They're not two separate things.
Right.
And you can't, in MMA, especially nowadays, you see it. Maybe before you could, but now people's games are so developed, you cannot divorce. Even though people are only striking, their jiu-jitsu's still there. You're just not seeing it directly.
Right. And it's still affecting what the other person decides to do.
Exactly. Conor is thinking, if I drop him, how am I going to finish him now?
Right.
Which is beautiful to see, because it's a whole another element to the game that is coming in. You cannot be just a boxer. You cannot be just a jiu-jitsu guy. And for me, Alvarez not being so good at the jiu-jitsu element, although I know he's been training a lot, especially recently, me not having seen his jiu-jitsu that much is going to give Conor a lot of freedom to fight like he wasn't able to against Nate. And Conor loves freedom, so in that regard, I kind of agree with you. Stylistically, it does.
Okay, that's actually a really good point. I hadn't considered that as deeply. Technique-wise, here's where I see Conor taking the advantage. Or let me rephrase that. Here's what I see in Conor's favor. So the pressure and the strength difference and the wrestling in Alvarez's advantage. Here's how I see things potentially leading in the favor for Conor. Alvarez likes to throw big looping punches, right? And if you go back and you watch Alvarez versus Anthony Pettis, a lot of those big looping punches kind of fell short, right? And now with Pettis, you had a guy who's taller than Alvarez, very light on his feet, and pretty fast, right?
Similar to Conor.
But what Pettis doesn't have is the counter punching and that powerful left.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
And the angles.
And the angles of McGregor as well. So I can see the potential for. And also, I noticed when Alvarez catches people against the fence or he starts to flurry, he drops his hands to his hips. He kind of throws from his hips.
Yeah.
And that's
big uppercuts he's looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
And we saw when McGregor fought Aldo, what cocking up can potentially leave you open to against McGregor. So I can see that big wind-up and the big looping punches leaving a lot of openings for Conor's powerful left hand and his counter striking. Also, I noticed Alvarez tends to duck his head a lot, right? And I can see that leaving him susceptible to either a big left uppercut or that kind of corkscrew uppercut cross
his favorite.
That he loves.
Yeah.
So very reminiscent of what's his name? I think Pakistani or Indian boxer. I can't think of his name right now. Real flat. Yes. He used to do that as well.
Yeah.
I could see Alvarez getting caught with one of those.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Do you know the funny thing about this one is I can see Alvarez getting knocked out 100 different ways, and you can only really see McGregor getting hurt really just one way. Well, there's two ways. One is the kind of constant beating him up, taking him down and beating him up. We're going to see. That's a very, very plausible. He might win 5-round fight. He could easily win a 5-round fight, a decision, by just beating him up the whole time. But also, I see, honestly, for some reason, this is just an intuitive thing. So I don't really have any backup for this. But I can also see McGregor getting caught.
Yeah.
The big, wild overhand right.
It can happen. It can definitely happen.
I can see him getting dropped with the overhand right. And I was just looking while you were talking, I was just looking up the odds of an Alvarez knockout. And, I mean, he's plus 150 to win.
Alvarez is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a decent... It's not that crazy, but it's a decent set of odds. I would think about, even though I think Conor's winning this one, I wouldn't mind putting $100 on an Alvarez knockout, just because I'm curious, and I'm a big, you know me, I'm a big Conor fan, but I don't know. Also, the way he's been talking about it, he seems to possibly be underestimating.
But Conor, isn't that kind of his MO? He does kind of downplay everybody he fights. I wonder how much of that he actually takes seriously, personally.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? In the build up to the Nate fight, you actually saw there was a little bit. I mean, we spoke about this last time. We did see there was a little bit of let's call it respect.
In their second fight?
In first and the second. Even in the first two, you saw him getting very, very pumped up and angry and offended. But so he obviously cared what Nate had to say. He let him talk. He mentioned numerous times, I have a lot of respect for Nate, blah, 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 and Nick too. I think there was a little healthy fear there. And I think that played out in the fight. And he doesn't have that with Alvarez. But I can't quite tell. Because especially for Conor, I think his mental game is really, really important. I can't quite tell if he believes what he's saying or he doesn't in this particular fight. I think it's possible the spell has been broken.
Right.
So we'll see.
I think to wrap this subject up, whatever happens, one of the benefits of this is we will finally get to see Conor fight a wrestler who is fresh and prepared and had time to go into a camp for Conor. That's been kind of one of his biggest criticisms, is no one's really giving him a wrestler, save Mendes, and that was kind of a last minute, It was
a last minute thing. And look, he's also fighting a lightweight. It's a big difference, dude. Mendes, maybe it was just Conor's night and he was untouchable, because that does happen. I mean, we saw Anderson Silva take full-on right crosses and right hooks off of both Forrest and the American Psycho. And, we can see there are certain people who you can hit them and it's not going to do anything. As 3 pounds to the chin or whatever that people say, you need 3 pounds on the chin, 3 pounds of pressure on the chin and someone gets knocked out. I've seen that not happen.
Right.
And Conor seems to possibly be one of those guys who can just not get knocked out. But especially by Mendes, who hits hard for a 45er. But again, Conor, I think, is a natural lightweight, and he was fighting a division of guys who were lighter than him.
Okay.
And he's fought at lightweight in Europe and cleaned them out before. But look, with all due respect, the caliber of opponent in Europe is not the caliber of opponent in the UFC.
Right.
So when you couple that together, a wrestler who's fresh, with power at 155 pounds and who's just destroyed Dos Anjos, then you have kind of the perfect storm possibly against Conor. So we're going to see. If I was a betting man just looking at the odds, again, I would put my money on Alvarez, and I'll probably put it on a knockout too.
Okay.
But that's just because the odds are always against him and the odds are always on Conor. But honestly, at least on paper, I think Conor has the start for this one.
Okay, so we pretty much agree across the board for this.
I'd
for
say
this,
so. I'd say so.
Okay.
I'd say so. The rest of the cards are amazing too, though. I mean, we could do a 3-hour podcast on this one.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, I'm just going to say this real quick.
Yeah.
What I find what's going to be interesting is Gastelum versus Cerrone. This is going to be a second fight for Cerrone at 170. And he looked so good in his last one. I would really like to see him stay probably at 170.
Was he 170 last fight?
I believe so.
Against was it Story?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I mean, that was for me. That was a knockout of the year.
It was, or it should at least be eligible.
Just in terms of the martial arts aspect of it.
Here's my only
kickboxing essay.
Yeah, and it was a really sick combo.
Yeah, 4 punch combo. Every single one was pretty much a knockout hit and just flush. You can't even you can practice those. I mean, we started practicing in the gym after, but that's really
to catch that live.
And every single one hurt, and he just adapted each hit, and oh gosh, I loved it.
Cerrone isn't very consistent though.
He's not consistent.
You can get two very different Cerrones.
At all. Sometimes he does not show up, and he gasses, and he's been having too many, Budweisers or whoever's paying him to drink their beer right now. Sometimes he gets carried away, but I think, I don't think that's his style, dude. He's a cowboy. Yeah. Sometimes he doesn't show up. He's not reliable. He's not necessarily a safe pair of hands, but when he's good, he's really one of the best.
Yeah, man.
So we'll see who shows up. Real quick, what do you think of? Well, by the way, Raquel Pennington was the one Miesha Tate was fighting.
Okay.
What do you think of Khabib? 23-0, dude.
I don't know.
Neither do I. I think he's fought one fight in the UFC.
Yeah, when you see footage of him, he looks insanely dominant.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have much of a track record in the UFC for me to really compare that dominance against other UFC caliber fighters. Look at what's his name, Hector Lombard. Before he came to the UFC, was just raping everybody and just pillaging everybody. Yeah. And then when he came to the UFC, it wasn't quite the same.
I don't know how much. With a lot of times with those big guys, the steroid question comes up. How hard are they testing in other organizations? And then you come to UFC and they actually test you, and you can't do that shit anymore.
Right.
Because when he had a few fights in the UFC at the beginning, and he was. It's like his judo sets up his boxing, because his boxing wasn't actually perfect, but he could knock the shit out of you. Yeah. And you didn't want to come in too close, because he'll just judo the shit out of you. So he kind of usually had you right where he wanted, but then he seemed to have lost that.
He does. He does.
Element. But as far as back to Khabib, I think he wins it. I mean, he's at 23-0, so I don't see why he's going to lose now. But it's kind of he's number one contender, and he's not even on the main card.
Yeah, he doesn't. I feel and I don't know what the issue is. I think there's been some injury issues with him.
Is that what it is?
But he hasn't fought frequently at all. Yeah. It's very infrequent and sporadic. So
kind of underachieving.
Yeah, that's just one of those things. I honestly gotta wait and see.
Yeah.
I feel like the hype is for Khabib, but I haven't seen enough to say whether or not I believe it.
Giving him a guy, I don't want to say Michael Johnson's a gatekeeper, but he's kind of a gatekeeper. So I mean, I think they're trying to, build him. They're trying to build him. I reckon they're probably trying to build him for Conor. I mean, if you said, Dana, wave a magic wand, what's going to happen in 6 months or 1 year or whatever, they're going to, Khabib's going to get some fights in, get some big knockouts or whatever, and then there's going to be some super match between this undefeated, kid from Russia and Conor. think that's what they're trying to do.
I can see that.
We'll see. Nothing happens like you planned it.
True that. Yeah. That said, something that came to mind reviewing the last episode we did is I didn't really get a chance to kind of talk to you personally and get to really like actually talk to you. We spoke just kind of on just some different things and all of that. So let's start. First of all, where are you from originally? Kind of, what's your background?
Okay, we can do that stuff.
Let's do that stuff.
All right, I was born in London, which is in England, which is in the United Kingdom.
That's where my mother's from, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Dope. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Damn. You're from all over the place, huh?
I'm a mutt to the fullest degree.
Yeah, proud of it, team.
It is what it is. Can't change it, so, you gotta rock it.
So, yeah, I was born and raised in London. I moved out here around 18. I used to play rugby in high school. I used to play for county. Came out here. I kind of made a natural transition into... Actually, I started with self-defense. When I was 18, I started with Krav Maga worldwide in LA. Who are awesome, by the way, for anyone who's listening. Because I came out here and I didn't have any friends. It was just me at the time. I was staying with my 80-year-old aunt or whatever. And I looked around and LA seemed like, coming from London, I had that kind of street mentality or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's very much a lad culture. It's very much a kind of argy-bargy type of place, as we say. But then I came out here and I thought, geez, these guys are kind of handy as well, So I figured, I remember the first week I was here, I was on the bus and some kids pulled out a knife. And they didn't necessarily threaten me with it, but they were trying to, they were letting me know.
Showing that they had it. Just kinda,
exactly. Uh-huh. So I was like, all right, cool. I better learn to actually fight, because I'd been in street fights and I was big and I was tough and whatever, but I didn't know how to actually fight. And I knew that, I knew a real fighter, it's different. So I started with this self-defense with Krav Maga. They were awesome. They led me to an amateur fight. I did my amateur. I won in the third round by spinning back fist.
Nice.
And then I bounced around for various organizations and did MMA at an amateur level with various people. Now I'm with Warrior the Warrior. And I compete kind of for fun. I never went pro. But it's just, MMA is just a huge, huge passion for me. I also do some personal training. I'm looking to open up a gym next year. So there's things in the works there. In LA, obviously. And then I just got my life coaching certification too, which I know you're kind of interested in. Mm-hmm. So I got my life coaching certification. I don't know exactly how those various elements of my background are going to work together, but I mean, everyone's unique. Everyone has something to offer, and as long as you follow that internal voice telling you which step to take,
Okay.
It'll
come together.
Something cool.
The pieces will come into their own thing.
Yeah, and it's got to be original. It's got to be fresh. It's got to be real. You can't fake it. But I'm excited.
Well, for sure. I think, and actually, the friend of mine who I had on before the last episode I did with you is also working to put a gym together. He actually wants to call it My Gym, so JIM, Journey Into Me. Right? Okay. And one of the things that we talked about was how physical fitness, and we see this very strongly within the martial arts, but even just general physical fitness is oftentimes a tool for other forms of self-improvement.
It's a gateway drug.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. So considering the life coaching, we can consider that a form of, although you may disagree with the terminology, just for parlance, a form of self-improvement.
Oh, for sure, yeah. That's how you get into it.
As is, the physical fitness, as is self-defense, and it's all about...
And honestly, MMA too.
MMA
as well.
It's all a form of bettering oneself.
Yeah.
And kind of finding and pushing and playing with one's boundaries and one's limits and all of that. So I definitely see a correlation there.
Yeah.
something I've noticed throughout life, both with myself and with others, is oftentimes the things that we gravitate towards the most as adults are things that we felt we didn't have in our childhood, right? So a very obvious and overt example would be Michael Jackson, right? He didn't have a childhood, and so as an adult, he has this Wonderland park, and he becomes, the real life Peter Pan, if you will, right? So for you, was there anything in your upbringing that you felt maybe kind of gravitated you in these kind of directions at all? I mean, you mentioned obviously London and the UK being kind of having a rough
vibe. It could be. But honestly, it depends what you do. You couldn't really avoid it, but it wasn't like, real. I didn't grow up in a real rough neighborhood where I couldn't have avoided it. Like, in certain parts of LA even, you have to. But I guess looking back, I could have kind of avoided it to a large degree and turned the other cheek and stuff. But when conflict came about, I ran towards it. I didn't want to kind of run away from it. So that kind of started me on it. That kind of definitely laid the foundation. I was just curious about, I think, personal power, where it came from, why some people weren't intimidated by others, and why you could intimidate certain people in certain situations, and the whole game of it. It is a game, honestly. Sometimes it's a game that gets taken too far and people end up getting hurt or killed or whatever. But to me, I really do think it's, whether you see it like that or not, it's a game that we all play.
Yeah. And
that might be on the street situation with violence and physical violence, or it might be in a business situation with, you could say, economic violence, because those some of those guys are just as cutthroat as some of the guys on the street as well. You can see in politics. That's also, I think, it's very similar. I look at this recent, whole presidential kerfuffle, and we're talking about this on the day of Trump's election, not his inauguration, but last night he won the election.
He did,
and to me that was, probably because I couldn't vote and I had to be a neutral. To me, that was another element of the game. It's just, am I better than you, and how do I win, and it's the same game, just on a grander scale, I think. And that's the thing I was always interested in. I'm still interested in. I probably will be interested in until the day I die.
Okay.
But as far as where that came from, if that was your original question. Like, if there's anything in my childhood that I was missing that made me kind of seek that out. No, I don't know. I think some people are just curious about that.
Okay. That's a totally reasonable answer.
My parents were cool. They were not super lovey-dovey type, super, I wasn't like spoiled or anything, but like, they were pretty cool. They kind of let me do my own thing. I was the youngest, so I got away with a lot of shit whenever I would get in school. My parents were like, I don't give a shit, just you expelled, that's your problem, type of thing. As long as I was, respectful around the house, they were cool with me. I don't know, I was just one of those people who had a taste for adversity, I think.
Okay. Yeah. That's reasonable. Yeah. People are born with different personalities and different inclinations. Yeah. Okay, cool. With the life coaching in particular, so what exactly would you say that entails for somebody who, they've never heard of this before, they don't have a clear idea of what exactly that is?
Yeah. Well, there's different types of life coaching. So one of the probably more famous, like if you think life coach, the most famous is Tony Robbins, right? Mm-hmm. And that's all about personal power, your energy levels, attracting success into your life by kind of, I don't know too much about it, but kind of enforcing your will upon your environment.
Okay.
And kind of forcing your environment to give you what you want to some degree. But I mean, it's also quite conscious. He seems like a really decent guy, and I think he helps people a lot. But it's a little bit different, the approach we have. Generally, life coaching is just the kind of the pursuit of success. It's kind of looking at how you approach success, and how you're set up mentally for success. And people take different approaches. So again, Tony Robbins is kind of is kind of like having a lot of energy, and letting your energy create a successful environment. And I guess in a way we're not that different. The life coaching organization I come from is called 3 Principles. 3 Principles Life Coach. And we're not that different in words, but it's kind of a different feel. With us, we're taking the approach that basically every experience you have, your whole life, is thought created. More or less, it's basically all in your mind. And if you can see that you're creating every experience, good and bad, it's not just the bad stuff, good and bad, then you can have a certain, I don't want to say detachment, because in a way you care a lot more quality comes into your life, but you are not a victim of your life anymore. Because you realize that you're creating your whole life from the inside out and your perception of it. The thing is, like if I say to you, it's all in your head, man. You come to me with a problem, or you come to me with a goal, or you come to me with whatever. You say, you tell me about some experience you're having. And I say, it's all in your head. Right? People say that all the time. Right? And you'll be like, yep. You get it, right? You get it. But then you think, it's all in my head. So what a lot of people think is, all right, so how do I change my thoughts then?
All right.
So if I'm thinking this all, how do I change my thoughts? Now, a child realizes that they don't know. I actually coach a 12-year-old. Really, really cool. I love working with the younger folk, because they get this stuff actually a lot better than the adults. But you know intuitively on some level that you actually don't need to change your thoughts. But we're so ingrained, especially in our culture and Western culture, in being the active creator in our life, that we think we have to go in and make better thoughts. So then you get into positive thinking and affirmations and so on and so forth. For a lot of people that doesn't work, that breaks down. And the reason is because when you're doing that, all you're doing is you're adding more thought. So it's not so much that you're chasing good thoughts or you're chasing bad thoughts, or good thinking or bad thinking, or good emotions or bad emotions, because emotions and thoughts are kind of the same thing. It's not so much that you're trying to push away the bad and bring in the good. It's more that you realize that the less thinking, the less emotion that's in a way, the more your true self comes into things. And the more creativity and love and passion and joy comes into things, because that's your natural state of being. Again, you look at a kid and you can see that. To make it a little less airy-fairy, I could point to fighters even. Since we've been speaking about fighting today, I could point to anything, but I can talk about fighters. When you see, like, the reason why Conor, for example, is such a pioneer. We don't really, he's confident, he has a big mouth, he's very flashy, he's an amazing fighter. There's lots of different reasons, but for me, the main reason is he really gets this stuff. You hear the SBG guys saying there is no opponent. Now, they can all explain that in different ways, but what they're really saying, I think, if they really get it, is it's all in your mind.
Right.
You're fighting yourself in there.
Right.
Because you're creating the entire world. That might not make sense to you right now on some level, but it probably does make sense at another level. So if you listen with your head, you'll say, no, there's another guy in there. I'm fighting another guy. But for some reason, fighters who fought a lot, somehow they get the response you're getting right now, where they say, yeah, you're right, I am fighting myself.
Right.
And the more clearly you can see that, the more greatness comes into whatever it is you're doing in this case.
Well, one of the things, so last night, in preparation for this conversation, I asked, if there was a head or a main guy, who would I look up? He said Mike O'Neill. So I looked up maybe 2 or 3 little clips of his, some speeches. And one of the points that he made, which I thought was a very good point, is and I'm probably going to butcher it, it's not going to be verbatim, but just because you think a thing doesn't mean it's actually what it is, or that you have to accept it. Like, you can just acknowledge that that was a thought that I had, and there it is, that was a thought, and leave it at that. And that's something, if you ever listen to like any Alan Watts or any like Buddhist or Zen philosophy, they always talk about the observer. So there's you, the thinker, who's thinking the thoughts, but then there's also you, who is the person who is seeing and observing the thoughts that are being thought, right? And being able to kind of acknowledge that your thoughts aren't necessarily who you are. They are in the fact that they kind of frame how you see things, but they are not innately you. You can kind of disassociate yourself, if you will, for maybe lack of a better term, from your thoughts. And that simply thinking a thing doesn't mean you have to actually do it or take it on, right? And to your analogy with fighting, or really, as you said, with anything else, I think it becomes more so the way that they say, like, it's you're fighting yourself, is ultimately your performance and how you deal with that other person boils down to how you manage yourself and how well you can do without getting in your own way. Essentially stopping yourself from stopping yourself, if you will. Would you say that's kind of along the right lines?
It's definitely along the right lines. I think you get it. But this is what I would say is there are levels.
Okay.
And I don't want to get too deep too quick,
right,
or go too far off so we lose listeners and lose you. But there are levels to being, to existence, to consciousness. And your level of thought will dictate your level of consciousness. So your reality now, this is hard to put into words, I guess. Your level of reality, the rules on that work on one level of reality won't necessarily work at another one.
Okay.
So for me to sit and argue with someone else about how life works, and they think they're right, and they're 100% sure that that's how life works, and I think I'm right, and I'm 100% sure that this is how it works for me, is I now see as ridiculous, because every single person fluctuates in their level of consciousness and therefore their reality. There are levels of reality where even the rules of physics can be bended.
Okay.
So, not necessarily broken.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to go that far. But you look at, again, we're talking about fighters, so we're talking about fight. You look at fighters who seem to bend the rules of physics. And what that is for me is that they're accessing a level of consciousness that's deeper than most of us.
Okay.
If you're and the way to get to deeper levels of consciousness, which are more enjoyable, those are more enjoyable when you're at a deeper level of consciousness, or higher consciousness. You know what I mean? That level is gained by less thought.
Okay.
So, to come back to your question, you said, for me, the way I interpreted what you said was that it's how you deal with the opponent in front of you and how you deal with your emotional reaction to what's going on is going to dictate how you fight. That is true. That is absolutely true. But there are deeper levels of consciousness even than that, where you see it. Not that you believe what I'm saying, this would be useless, but that you see that you are creating the entire fight. If your fight is a struggle, you created the fight as a struggle. And if you can see it firsthand, if you can be that consciousness, if that makes any sense, you can be that consciousness where you see you're creating things, you're free to create something smoother and easier.
Right.
And you're free to create an easier fight, or a better fight, or a better anything.
kind of what, to use a different language, being present, and we've spoken about this before, but being present or being in the zone, there are other phraseologies that people have used, but getting out of your head and kind of out of your own way, more or less. I would be interested, obviously not today, I don't think time would dictate, but as somebody who's somewhat skeptical in nature myself.
And that's good. As long as you're not cynical.
There may be a little bit of that in there. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm full out Squidward, but I probably got a pinch of that in there too. But as someone who's somewhat skeptical about certain things,
science. That's good.
I would like to, at another date, hear what you mean by bending physics.
I know I caught you there. I know I got you there.
Because I think that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But for the most part, definitely.
I mean, how much time we got left?
We got like another 5 or so minutes, give or take.
Okay, so let me come back to, as I said, there are levels of reality. So let me come back to a more sort of standard one.
Okay.
That we can all share nicely. The rules of physics have been bent, have they not? Historically speaking.
How do you mean?
Well, we're going into the quantum age, right?
Okay.
I'm not a scientist, all right? You are, out of us two, you definitely are the authority here. So you tell me when I'm talking out my ass, okay? But what for example, Einstein's theory of relativity was true at the time. He proved that it was true.
Okay.
But now we're kind of seeing that actually there are some holes in that.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. I don't know if it's so much that the rules are being bent per se, as that we are finding out that there are other rules in play.
Right. But deeper rules.
I don't know. I maybe. I'm not a quantum physicist,
right.
So I couldn't, speak from a place of tacit knowledge. But it's new. It's newer to us. So anytime something is new and unknown, it seems deeper and more like, ooh, like this is the heavy shit.
Right.
But it's certainly less obvious or less overt. It's we wouldn't have quantum theory without the microscope and all these other things to kind of let us break things down into a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller observation. Mm-hmm. So in that context, I could say yes, it's probably deeper. It's not simply I drop the cup and look, oh shit, the cup falls. That's very overt.
Yeah.
Whereas from what I understand of quantum theory, it's much, much more minute, and it's what makes up the cup down to the nth degree.
Yeah.
That's like quantum physics.
Yeah.
So I personally couldn't elaborate too heavily on it, but I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So basically what we were sure about, you become. What you are sure about now, and you don't even have to talk about science, you just talk about life in general. You can be 100% sure of something, so much so that you then put it into your store bank of knowledge and say that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily the way it is. The way it is for you because you've put it there. And your consciousness then kind of recreates it as such. And all of us do it. I do it too. I'm not above it, right? But even those things are, if you were really prepared to look at those things that you had taken for granted as true, you might find that maybe they're not as true.
In Scientology, I've read some of Dianetics. I haven't read all of it. I can't speak as like a authority on Scientology. But one of the analogies that L. Ron Hubbard uses is the pressed down 7. And he's essentially saying the same thing that you're saying here, which is imagine you have a calculator and every time you hit, for whatever reason, there's a glitch where whenever you hit equal, it adds a 7, as if you had pressed down 7, right? So you might hit 2 plus 2, and then you hit equal, and unbeknownst to you, it adds this 7 to the equation. Mm-hmm. Based on what you are aware of, 2 plus 2 equals, it's giving you the right answer. Whatever the right answer is, because you're unaware of this pressed down 7, you accept as this is what it is. But so to relate that to an analogy for us, a lot of times there are beliefs or there are ideas that, whether it's from some personal experience or from something that was taught to us in our childhood, or just something that we've taken on and kind of stuffed into the back of our head that we accept is true, that isn't true, when we do make conscious calculations, that other little piece is added to it and we're not aware of it. And that kind of funks up our life equation.
That is a very good analogy. That's true. There are things essentially getting in the way, and when you see them and you find out that they are no longer true, that frees you up. You are more accurate. You have a much more accurate worldview, and thus you are more successful. Naturally, you are more loving. Naturally, your relationships work more naturally. There's less conflict naturally, because you're now working with a pair of eyeglasses that are helping you see the world as it is, as opposed to having all these funky kind of, misbeliefs and
distortions
and distortions. Yeah. Not to say again, but that's kind of I don't want to leave it at that, because that's one of those things where it's like, well, then you get into my belief versus your belief, my truth versus your truth. So the way we do life, getting back to life coaching, the way we do it, and we'll talk about this another time, one, is what's true.
Okay.
Let's find what we agree on. So it can be like very slow going sometimes, and it can be very fast going sometimes, and you never really know where the conversation is going to go. But for me, my approach to life coaching is kind of built on truth.
Okay.
Not truth as some abstract term, but literally truth between you and I. And if we don't both agree on it as truth, then we put it to the side and we move on. I'm not going to try and download anything. I'm not going to try and say, you are special little snowflake and you're amazing, because that might not be true for you right now, right? So for me, fundamentally, you gotta stick with the truth. So we can pick up that conversation another time, but it's not.
That sounds good, brother. I think that's a good place to end. We're at hour 1, so we're pretty much at the mark.
Beautiful.
As always, I thank you for coming on and talking with me.
Thank you, man.
For the listeners, if you enjoyed this or gotten anything out of this, please like, share. Go ahead and go into the comments. Put who you have for your picks for UFC 205, and thank you very much for your time.